with the world each week on Travel with Rick Steves. Together, we'll explore fascinating sights, discover amazing food, and make new friends from near and far. Your radio is the only passport you'll need. Join us for Travel with Rick Steves, Saturday afternoons at 1 on KSJE.
KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, here to meet your urgent and emergent medical needs, whether they are COVID-19 related or not. Medical emergencies happen when you least expect them. Whether it's a stroke, heart attack, illness, or injury, San Juan Regional Medical Center's caregivers are here to provide care to you and your loved ones. Find out more online at sanjuanregional.com. Eleven minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Monday morning, July the 26th, 2021. Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Michlin, and thanks for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM over the air, of course, here in San Juan County, New Mexico. 103.3 FM over the air in Durango, Colorado, and streaming everywhere on Earth, including your smart speaker from KSJE.com. Welcome also to our viewers who are watching us this morning. This visual radio program streaming live to the KSJE Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our Twitter account. We're glad that you are with us this morning, everybody. Coming up today, talking with guests from Childhaven right here in San Juan County. They've gotten a new grant, one of a very few number of organizations in the country to receive this grant to expand some of their child advocacy centers. We'll learn more about what that means and how they're going to do that coming up in the next few moments right here on KSJE. And then, of course, our coverage of technology with Lewis Campbell, and our Monday Reboot segment comes your way at 8:50 this morning. He'll be joining me live today. And then it is Connie Mack today. We've got 4 games on the docket. You'll hear radio coverage of all of them right here on KSJE, beginning with the game at 10 a.m. today. We'll be on the air before that, of course, with our pregame show. The Connie Mack World Series live from Ricketts Park. Today it's the Knights and the Renegades at 10, and then we go to 1 p.m. game, which is the Legend versus the Nighthawks, and the next game at 5:15 today will be the Dodgers versus the Redskins, and then, of course, this evening, it is DBAT United versus the Farmington Sting, and that is all the coverage you'll be hearing today, of course, on KSJE. We invite you to tune in, and, of course, check out our Facebook page and our Instagram page and our Twitter account. We post a lot of extra interviews and great photos from the games to those social media platforms. So lots of ways to interact with Connie Mack on KSJE this season. Don't forget, of course, to check us out on our social media platforms. And let's talk about the weather, shall we? Partly sunny skies this morning. It is 68 degrees in Farmington at the moment. We are expecting a partly sunny day today. There is still a chance of an isolated shower or thunderstorm, though, in the forecast. Take a look for today, tomorrow, and actually much of this week. So a scattered shower or thunderstorm in the forecast all week long. 85 for a high today in Farmington, 64 tonight, 87 tomorrow, back up to near 90 on Wednesday and Thursday, and overnight lows, though, in the mid-60s. Well, let me introduce my guests, as I mentioned, from Childhaven here in San Juan County. We welcome back to the KSJE microphones. Erin Hourihan is here, the CEO of Childhaven. Good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning, Scott.
Thank you for being here. We were talking that you've never been in the studio before, so
no, I haven't seen all this incredible equipment.
Yes, well, welcome back. Thank you. It's great to see you and have you here with us. Also, Andrea Pena is here from the Childhaven Foundation. Good morning to you. Welcome back.
Good morning. Thanks for having us this morning.
You are very welcome. It's great to see both of you, of course, after a year and a half of not seeing anybody in person. So I'm grateful that you're both here this morning. And to talk about this exciting news for Childhaven, congratulations to both of you, because this is a big deal.
It is. We saw the opportunity and took a look at a grant that came our way via the National Children's Alliance.
Right.
And that's kind of our accrediting agency nationally for children's advocacy centers that do the joint investigations of child abuse.
Exactly. And as I mentioned, Childhaven is just one of a very few number of organizations who received this grant. If I read the information correctly, right? One of just 6
Exactly.
in the country.
Right. And, at least in the lower 48 states.
Okay.
So there are also some awards up
Pardon
in,
me, Alaska and Hawaii. I'm
Exactly.
sorry.
We cannot forget
We
about
cannot,
them.
but
Right.
yes. But that's still significant.
It is.
Very
It
significant.
definitely is. So we were quite proud of ourselves, and it took a lot of research and writing abilities to be able to get it. But I think our community was really set up well for receiving these dollars.
And it's a multi-year grant, that I understand, 4-year grant?
Right.
Okay.
And yes.
And the idea, as you mentioned, to kind of, and I've said to kind of expand the child advocacy centers, but that may not be the right terminology because you're working with other organizations to see what will work in their community.
Exactly. So we don't want to say, and we didn't actually say in the grant how we're going to expand or what it was going to look like, just that we would convene different tribal groups that are within our service area that we've utilized. They have utilized Childhaven to help with their investigations of child abuse. But what we find is that it hasn't ever been a real formalized process. And so through this opportunity, we can both formalize it right here in San Juan County. The local entities that investigate child abuse are able to write their own protocol, say what law enforcement will do, explain the portion of the investigation that pertains to child protective services, how the medical examiners get involved through the sexual assault nurse examiners, how we integrate wellness through mental health services and family advocacy for all those affected family members. So it's kind of a big endeavor, and trying to investigate these sensitive cases jointly can be a little tricky at times.
Sure. And
you have different jurisdictions, different ways of doing investigations, and so it takes a lot of pre-thought and time to determine what's the best way to go about these investigations and actually write a written protocol. And so that is part of the grant that we're going to be putting together.
Right.
The actual how we want to do this. With
Exactly.
Both Navajo Nation, Zuni social services, and law enforcement have been utilizing our services that are in Gallup as well.
I was going to say, you have child advocacy centers both in Gallup and here in Farmington. So
Right.
those would be the nearest Native American tribal communities to those 2 centers.
Exactly.
Got you.
So we have had other tribal entities that have used us just once in a while. So we want to reach out to each of these entities and see, is this something that either they want to formalize with Childhaven, and we can continue to have the forensic interviewers that can ask the children the questions, and they work with us to make sure we're getting all the information we can. Or is it something that any of these tribal nations would like to determine for themselves that perhaps they want a child advocacy center, maybe on the Navajo Nation somewhere,
Right.
and be able to do those investigations.
And would that be operated by Childhaven or the tribe, or to be determined?
To be determined,
I see.
right. And
Okay.
so we will just see what those tribal entities want to do, what they feel is best. We, as being one of the nationally accredited child advocacy centers, we could certainly lend the expertise and mentor any of the entities that would want to get started.
Sure.
And we've been doing this, I think, since about 1996. And so it's kind of grown over the years, and I think we've just developed a good team.
Right.
And,
Well, obviously, I would think, and these grantors agree.
Right. So
So,
that was neat.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
So,
like
again,
the icing on the cake
Congratulations.
when others recognize you. Yeah.
Indeed. Let me turn to Andrea Pena for just a
Yes.
moment, who's with the Childhaven Foundation. And Andrea, I think this this grant news kind of reinforces what we know about Childhaven and the important work that it does in the community and the work that you do to raise money for the organization to help make sure that kids have a safe place to go. Again, when there's child abuse, that there's this child advocacy center where the investigation can be started and can happen in an organized and accredited way. I mean, all this is really important, I would think, for the work that you do.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. And we know that the work behind the scenes and even, those that are dealing with these cases up front, it's really high quality people. We are accredited, and that in and of itself has the recognition that it deserves, but it's a validation, I would say, to get this federal recognition where here's a organization in Farmington, New Mexico, who has put in the work and the people to create a program that is not only sustainable, but is very impactful. And for us to get the recognition to grow that means a lot. And Erin is one of the most humble people I've ever met, but she mentioned that this has happened since 1996, conveniently around the same time that she started. And so Erin has been with Childhaven for 25 years, and I must say that the accomplishments that have happened at Childhaven, a lot of that is due to Erin. And something about Childhaven that I have appreciated is that it looks beyond just San Juan County. Probably 2 years ago, we had the National Children's Alliance, not National, New Mexico Children's Alliance, right? Am I saying that one right?
That's right.
Under Childhaven's umbrella, and then that grew to a point where it needed to be delegated, but that was an initiative that helped open children's advocacy centers in other places throughout the state and continues to support that effort. And so it's an exciting thing to see, and then also to know that there are more children and families getting this resource and getting this support. So as far as fundraising and development, it's something to say, we know we're doing a good job, but we have even the federal level of Children's Advocacy Center saying Childhaven's doing what they need to do, and we want to make that even better.
Right. And if I recall correctly, when we were talking about the statewide need for more children's advocacy centers, it was a lot of education, I think, of the state legislature to try to get some funding for those centers as well. Am I remembering that correct?
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
Definitely.
Because we had this you all had this great idea, but the idea was, how do we pay for it?
Right.
And how do we do this in other corners of the state, which didn't have the
Definitely.
resources maybe that we have here?
Sure.
And so I do recall that. Anyway, let me ask you a bit about doing these services, these child advocacy centers on the reservation, because when we talk about child abuse and these cases of child abuse, they're always horrific and horrible, and we want to get help to these children and these families. It's not just the child, but I know you deal with the families as well. And I think we sometimes hear about more cases, and I have any facts to back that up, on the reservation maybe than off the reservation, but I think it's a big problem there as well.
Exactly. And
they may not have the resources, I guess, that maybe we would think of off the reservation, maybe law enforcement or judicial or what have you, or social services. And so I guess that would maybe be a bit more challenging than with this type of a grant to say we just can't slap one of these centers maybe in the middle of the reservation and expect it to work like it does elsewhere.
Exactly. And even throughout the state, as Andrea was mentioning, we try to have the locations kind of so that each child could travel maybe 1 to 2 hours to be able to get to a child advocacy center. And so not only within New Mexico, but also within, say, the Navajo Nation, it's important to have that proximity to those services. And it is going to be, I think, just a challenge to see what are the different resources available or what is not available. And it may mean more grant writing in the future. And we are just going to be hiring a tribal liaison that's going to help us with this endeavor and be able to set up meetings with the various different entities to discuss what are the possibilities, how this might look, And we already have had Delegate Amber Crotty from the Navajo Nation reach out to us to say that we're ready for the first meeting. And
Excellent.
so we're just trying to hire our folks and get them in place so that we can start as a full team and be able to see what are the next steps. I think the biggest challenges with doing services on the Navajo Nation, for example, would be the fact that you're working on some of the cases, any child 12 years old or younger would also be investigated by the FBI. And so working not only with the criminal investigators from the Navajo Nation, but also with the FBI. And how does that work? And sometimes when here in Farmington, we have an FBI office, and so sometimes the interviews are at our center, and sometimes they're done through the FBI. So it really takes a lot of pre-discussion, trying to navigate whose turn is it,
Right.
or how do we want to investigate this particular case, maybe the age of the child, and how they think it might flow and go best. And so it can really be a challenge, especially when each and every case can be very different.
Right. And again, to remind us all about the purpose of these child advocacy centers and the work they're already doing, even off the reservation, but with tribal children and tribal families and things along that line, the idea is to kind of determine what happened in an important way, and I guess in a logical way, so that the case is strong and is good, and that the child doesn't have to keep repeating their story over and over again. At least that's what I'm remembering about it.
That's right.
In a way that then law enforcement can be involved, and children's services can be involved, children, youth, and families, and whatever other agencies are involved in an organized way. Is that a good way to describe it?
That's exactly it. So we have at the center, there is a large room. During COVID, we, of course, kind of broke out and used technology and had separate rooms in the center where each of the maybe law enforcement would sit there in one room, and we'd have social worker. And it's best to kind of get everybody up front together at the same time that the child is coming in to disclose what has happened to them. And hopefully everybody's able to be there. On the few occasions when they aren't, we are able to record the sessions with the children, and then this is then booked into evidence with law enforcement. They're the safe keeper of the evidence, and
Right.
then other entities, the district attorney's office can take a copy of the tape and be able to determine what our next step, help law enforcement look at various different appropriate charges. So we're really talking about healing and justice for children, and being able to do it in a way that is well orchestrated and not after the fact. And so it takes a lot of time and expertise, a lot of training. And part of this grant, one of the opportunities is to work with a Native American nonprofit group that is based up in Oregon, I believe, and they are able to look at child trauma from a Native American perspective. And so they're going to be the main group that we're contracting with to be able to train all our multidisciplinary team partners.
Gotcha. And again, this whole concept, and even we've been doing it here for a number of years, could be new to some people. And so the idea, though, being just to do it once, or hopefully not many more times than just once, to have the child only have to recount what happened to them once, and that then is admissible in court.
Correct.
Or as the case progresses, I guess, is the idea, correct?
Right.
Because of the way it's been organized, and everybody's on the same page and maybe in the same room or linked, or has their 2 cents to be able to chime in if they so wish.
Exactly. And it does depend on the court that you're in.
Right, of course.
As to whether the actual tape is admissible, and that's something we're working on with the legislature,
Right.
and trying to pass some bills,
Right.
So that can happen everywhere.
Right.
But-
But I guess I'm so amazed that in some other localities that don't have this type of resource, that a child who's been through this trauma would need to retell their story multiple times.
Exactly.
And every time, all the emotional whatever that goes with it, multiple times.
Oh, definitely. And in some cases, if a child, say, oftentimes kids might disclose to someone at school, for example, and then depending on the school, the particular person that they disclose to may or may not have been trained on how to handle child abuse disclosures. And so the proper way is to make sure that the, say, law enforcement jurisdiction and Child Protective Services are notified right away. If there's a child that has come to you as a trusted adult, you don't have to always just report it to the next person within your entity, whether that be a school or another agency. It's important to know that a disclosure is something that you don't want to be starting to ask the child questions, because when a child is having to tell their story maybe to the teacher and then maybe to the principal, and then law enforcement gets involved, and then a social worker might come along in a place where they don't have a coordinated center, it can really have drastic effects on that child's disposition and how they feel about disclosing in the first place, because it was a very challenging and difficult decision that they made to do that. And so it's important that we get it right the first time and help support them through it, and have the right trained people, the personnel, to be able to handle it properly and help them
Right.
through the process.
And that has been, I think, the mission of Childhaven, just to
Right.
help all these children from no matter what issue they're coming from or what problems they've had or abuse they've had, all those things. That has been the ongoing mission of Childhaven, is to help these children who come to you.
Definitely. It's lifting children from crisis to hope. And
That's the slogan. That's
we
right.
kind
The
of
motto
stick with it and make
mission.
sure that whatever new services or programs that we have, that we are keeping to that mission. And if it's not something that fits within our mold, then we make sure that we find the entity that it does fit with their mission and work with them. And so I think that's been the beauty of working on building our child advocacy centers, is just it's such a community process to figure out how to do it best and how to do it best here. We're not Albuquerque,
Right.
so we don't have different things that they might have, and it is important to be able to look at people from our sheriff's office and the different local police stations and find out who are the people that do these cases locally, and then say, okay, how do we want to move forward on every case and make sure that each child's story is able to be documented properly, and really find out what we can do. And in the old ways of doing things, sometimes children would recant their story because they would find that people kept asking them the same question about what happened, and sometimes not feel like they were being heard, and so they would
Or believed.
change. Yep.
I suppose.
Exactly. And so it's just a smart way of doing these cases.
Right. You say we're not Albuquerque, which I totally agree with. No offense, Albuquerque, but we're also not Kayenta, we're not Zuni, and that's why this grant, I guess, is so important to maybe kind of really fit the center and the policies to those communities too, which is what you're going to be working on over the next, 4 years, I guess, correct?
Right.
Or hopefully shorter than that. Is this a planning grant or an actual implementation
No, it's an
grant?
actual implementation grant.
Okay.
It's funny, we received the grant in, I think, June, and somehow this one goes all the way back to January 1st.
Oh.
So we're kind of starting
Okay.
late, I guess.
Right.
But it's how the monies flow
Oh, sure.
from the federal, those federal dollars. Don't always make sense, but we'll take them.
That's right.
And
right. So the work has started, as
It's
you mentioned,
started, right.
to meet with these tribal representatives and just figure out how this is going to work. And I would assume that the hope is that maybe if there are child abuse cases on the reservations in these tribal communities that maybe aren't being reported, that will change.
Exactly. Right. We
And
do
that these
expect the
cases will
numbers
be
to go up.
adjudicated.
Right. Definitely.
In the right way and in the important way, and these children will get the help that they need.
Yes.
And that's the important thing. Andrea Pena, let me turn back to you about, the work about Childhaven and raising awareness, and of course, having Childhaven involved with some of these projects, reaching out to tribal communities and things along that line. I know Childhaven already has a great outreach with tribes, and a lot of children come in, or tribal children. Tell me a little bit about your work with tribal communities thus far, and how this will be maybe a little bit different, or what you're expecting.
I think that this will be an incredible opportunity for both Childhaven and the foundation, just because we have, we're here in San Juan County, and although we have our advocacy center in Gallup, who have been working on getting more outreach about Childhaven and the foundation, I think this will really help us have more of a presence and learning about other, there might be other meetings or things we might be able to go to and talk about what we do. And as you have been talking, I've been trying to think of what would a donor question be. So here's Childhaven receiving a significant grant. So then why should somebody continue donating to Childhaven? Well, we're talking about one program here.
That's right.
We're talking about one program.
Out of many.
And the Advocacy Center is definitely a significant program, along with all the other ones. They're each significant in their own way, but it does take a lot of financial support to ensure that these continue, and also to make sure that Childhaven remains comprehensive in their care for children. So we have shelter care all the way down to having volunteers helping children in foster care. We have a foster care program, advocacy center, therapies. I'm missing something, parent education.
Right.
And so there are a lot of things that need financial support. So here's one area that we've been able to secure funding, but this is a 4-year grant. What's going to happen in 4 years? And the same thing with other grants that
Sure. Right.
Childhaven utilizes. So it is still of utmost importance for Childhaven and the Childhaven Foundation, or how would I say it this way, for people to support the Childhaven Foundation who is supporting Childhaven. And I think that this is, well, not that I think this, I know this is an exciting time, and we're coming out of a pandemic, and I know we're not totally out of the pandemic, but if we look through this entire year and all that has happened, and to be able to see the hope that remains, and that is not only just there, but that is continuing, and that we get to be a part of that, and that journey that's continuing on for children in not just our community, but communities surrounding our area.
Right. And if I could pick up on that for just a moment, we're coming out of this pandemic, but the important point is Childhaven never shut down during the pandemic. The shelter never closed its doors. The child advocacy centers, while you did interviews differently, you never stopped
Right.
doing interviews with
Not one day.
abused children.
That's right.
And all those other services kept going even during the pandemic. And so the need is still there. I think there were a lot of concerns from folks that while kids were left at home, there were maybe more possibilities of abuse and neglect and things along that line that maybe weren't reported because teachers weren't interacting with kids face to face like they used to, so they wouldn't have maybe seen that to report. And I know that's a big concern for all of us who care about our community and the children in our community.
Oh, it is. When we look at our statistics and see the numbers, how drastically they were reduced in 2020, we're just starting to pick up, I guess, our business this year. And not that that's a good thing, but I think in our hearts we know that abuse continues, especially when people are isolated and
Right.
in their
Well, and
their own space.
Yeah, or mom's lost a job or dad's laid off, and I mean, there's just family stress.
Definitely, right. So it is something that we knew was important, that we had to continue and find ways to still see the kids, talk to them, and be able to deliver these services. And yeah, it's been a hard year, probably one of my hardest in the 25 years I've been there, but it's definitely important to continue to do the work and help the kids. And so I think where all the social services, I would say, in San Juan County and probably nationally are expecting the numbers to be just increasing throughout the year, and hopefully we'll be able to help the kids that all need it.
Right. Well, and again, thanks to the Childhaven Foundation that can support the various programs at
Yes.
Childhaven and keep the shelter open, and the other programs that are there, the foster care and the other things that we're talking about.
And CASA, we can't forget about.
Don't forget,
the
oh my gosh, I
court-appointed
can't believe we didn't mention
Advocates
CASA.
and
Yes.
Amy O'Neill.
Very
Right.
important, because
It
again,
is.
that's what helps these kids once they do get into court and they do advocate on their behalf. And
Definitely.
it's
Where should they go?
Right.
Can they go back home permanently? Is
what's the solution? What is and what does that advocate say on behalf of the child, so that the judge understands
Exactly.
what's going on in that particular case? Very important program. But this grant is so exciting, as you said, and again, congratulations, as Childhaven is just one of 6 entities in the lower 48 states to receive this grant, over $500,000. And again, I think it just goes to show the expertise that you have and that you've built here at Childhaven with these child advocacy centers in both Farmington and Gallup, and to be able to reach out to these tribal communities to figure out what they need to make this work in their communities. And
Right.
that's what you're going to be doing.
Make the system stronger everywhere, so every child, whether they live on the reservation or live in town, can receive the same expert level services for their case, and make sure that it is investigated well, and hopefully make things better in the end.
That's true. Well, it's all for the kids, and we appreciate you coming in this morning to
Oh,
let us
thanks for
know
having us.
about this opportunity, and much good luck. I hope to maybe get an update.
Yes,
maybe
we'll
in
be
a few
back.
months or a year, or whatever you think is
Definitely.
appropriate. But it's great to have you both here. Thank you so much.
you.
Andrea
Great.
Pena, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Erin Hourihan,
Yes.
thank you and your staff for the work that you do for our community.
Oh,
Thanks so much.
you're welcome.
My
Thank you.
You're welcome. My guest this morning, right here from Childhaven on KSJE.